All right. 11.4, the business architecture perspective. The business architecture perspective highlights the unique characteristics of business analysis when practiced in the context of business architecture. So far, we've had agile perspective, and the agile is how we work. Intelligence perspective is basically data, what we collect, what we know, the knowledge bases. Information technology is basically the system and how the information basically is transferred, translated, expanded upon. And it seems like the architecture perspective comes more towards design. And the last one seems to be process management perspective, which is a lot more in procedures, values, and where we kind of like live as a business. Not bad. The business architecture models the enterprise in order to show how strategic concerns of key stakeholders are met and to support ongoing business transformation efforts. So business architecture provides architectural descriptions and views referred to as blueprints and provided a common understanding of the organization of the purpose of aligning strategic activities with tactical demands. This discipline of, again, like when we're saying blueprints, it's blueprints of a system, blueprints of the business, blueprints of the شو اسمه of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim of a building. Simple, right? Architecture. The discipline of business architecture applies analytical thinking and architectural principles to the enterprise level solutions. May include changes in the business model, operating model, organizational structure, or drive other than initiatives. Business architecture follows certain fundamental architecture principles. One is the scope. The scope of business architecture is the entire enterprise. It's not a single project. Initiative process, again, like business architecture, you're architecting the business. So the blueprint of the entire fucking business, everything that goes in and out. Or a piece of information, it puts project processes and information into larger business context to provide an understanding of iterations, integration opportunities, redundancies, and inconsistencies. Separation of concerns. Business architecture separates concerns within its context. It specifically separates what the business does, what the businesses does from. The information the business uses, how the business is performed, how does it, and when an enterprise it is done, and where in the enterprise is it done, when is it done, why is it done, how well is it done. Right, we're figuring out how the functionality of the business works in order for us to understand how to kind of like create the blueprint around it. Once the interdependent concerns are identified, they can be grouped in specific combinations or mappings, which can be used to analyze targeted business issues. So one, there's scope, which is all business. Then we separate the concerns, like who, what, why, where, and when, how and when. Right, these are very important. There are many different questions that a business tries to answer or to provide the blueprint for alignment. Each of these different questions or business scenarios requires a different set of blueprints containing, again, like each business scenario technically operates within the whole system, but might very much so have its own mini system. So containing different set of information and relationship with different types of outcomes and measures. Like, okay, everything in the warehouse is not the same as everything when it comes to marketing. Although each one of them contribute to the whole, but they're different blueprints, like as on a smaller scale. Think about it from a building's perspective. We have everything plumbing and we have everything electricity. So like, you know, even in plumbing, there's the bringing the water in and distributing water, and they're extracting the crap and the crap water out. Those are two separate systems under plumbing. And then scenario-driven, there are many different questions that a business tries to answer. Scenario-driven, we just talked about that. And knowledge-based, when a primary goal of a business architecture is to answer these questions. A secondary but important goal is to collect and catalog the different architectural components. What, how, why, who. The way I do it is who, what, why, where, how, and when. Because once you answer who, what, why, where, then how and when basically are kind of like, you know, the edge cases. Like, okay, so now that we figured this out, how are we doing it, and when is it relevant? The knowledge base is often managed in a formal architecture repository. And here we are. Now we start going through the dramatic details. Let's talk about the change of scope. The change of scope on business architecture may be performed across the enterprise as a whole, across a single line of business within the enterprise, defining the architecture of one. Like again, like look at a building and then plumbing. Plumbing needs its own architecture, right? It has to comply with the building blueprints, but it has its own architecture across a single functional division. And within the division, maybe you need different blueprints as well, like depending on whatever it is that you're working on. So business architecture activities are generally performed with a view of the entire enterprise in mind, but may also be performed for an autonomous business unit within the enterprise. A broad scope is required to manage consistency and integration. At the enterprise level, for example, business architecture can clarify a situation where the same business capability is implemented by multiple different processes and multiple different organizations using different information models. Given the clarity that comes from an enterprise scope, the business can then determine if this structure is the best way to align with strategic objectives. Once you figure out how the business operates, where it's operating, when, why, and what it operates as, then basically you'll be able to kind of like understand what you will be kind of like, what architecture is going to go where and for what reason. Ultimately, with the depth of change, you understand the people that are kind of like included, and you understand like, okay, like do I have to change how the warehouse operates if all I want to do is kind of like shows. Maybe think about it this way. I'm going to stick to the building metaphor. Do I have to change how the floors receive water if my biggest issue is just delivering water all the way up to the actual like tanks? Or maybe all I have to do is just get a bigger pump, right? So all of these are kind of like, in a way, dependent on each other, but one way or another, they're kind of like necessary for you to understand what you're going to be working with or what is it that you're going to be interacting with. So depth of change, business architecture effort may focus on the executive level of the enterprise to support strategic decision making. The person working in a warehouse does not necessarily need to understand how the whole system of the warehouse works, but they do need to understand their part in it. So most of architecture is for executive level support, why the fuck not? Or management level support for the execution of the initiatives. Remember, like, executive level of the enterprise is strategic, whilst management level is tactical, right, for an execution. While business architecture provides important context, it does not usually operate at the operational decision or process level. Instead, it assesses processes at the level of the value stream. Yes, it assesses things at the level of the value stream, as in like where is value, how is it being translated, and that is basically the stream that we target on. Value and solutions delivered. Business architecture using the principle of separation of concerns develops the model and decompose of the business system solution. Decompose, remember we use the word deconstruct for it. But we decompose the business system, solution, or organization into individual elements. That's basically systems thinking. And with special solutions and show the interaction between them. The elements of business architecture models include capability, value, processes, information, and data. Those are basically what's expected from us. Reporting and management, stakeholders, security strategies, and outcomes. Architecture model enable organizations to see the big picture of the domain that is under analysis, and they provide insights into the important elements of the organization or software system so that they fit together and highlight the critical components of the capabilities. The insights provided by business architecture help keep systems and operational functioning in a coherent and useful manner. Of course, because you're kind of like, it's a visual about how things are moving or how things are built. Of course, it helps it. When change is being considered, the architecture provides details on the elements that are most relevant to the purposes of the change. Of course, because you look at a whole building and you go like, we have a plumbing problem, so you highlight plumbing issues, not electricity. Because an architectural model also shows how the parts are related, it can be used to provide impact analysis to tell what other elements of the system and businesses might be affected by the change. Architecture itself can be used as a tool to help identify needed changes. The performance metric for each element of the architecture can be monitored and assessed to identify when an element is underperforming. The importance of each element can be compared to the performance of the organization or system as a whole. This assists decision makers when considering where investment is needed, how to prioritize those decisions. Yeah, so like what he's talking about is basically the flow and how basically like, architecture kind of creates a clear structure for people to be able to follow and then kind of like realize when, I don't know, when things are not really working according to expectations or when things are starting to kind of like fall apart away from expectations. The functions of business architecture is to facilitate, coordinate, and synchronize actions across the organization by aligning action with the organization's vision, of course, because like you don't build you build a car based on a design, right? And the design is the vision of how the car would look like, and engineers basically like keep tweaking and following until finally it's there. The architectural models created by this process are the tools used to clarify, unify, and provide understanding of the intent of the vision, goals, and strategy, and to ensure that resources are focused and applied to the elements of the organization that align with the support with this direction. Architecture kind of like isolates highlights each person's position and what they contribute to, and it allows people to kind of like engage in that manner, bringing about a more cohesive approach to their I don't want to use the word commitment, to their value. Cohesive approach to their value, to the value they drive. All right. The architectural models created in the process are tools you needed to clarify, unify, and provide understanding and intent to the visions, goals, and strategy, and to ensure the resources are focused and applied to the elements of the organization that align with the support of this decision. Okay. Business architecture provides the blueprint that management can use to plan and execute strategies for both information technology and non-IT perspectives. Business architecture is used by organizations to guide strategic planning, business remodeling, organizational redesign, performance measurement, and other transformation initiatives to improve customer retention, streamlining business operation, cost reduction, the formalization of institutional knowledge, and the creation of a vehicle for business to communicate and deploy their business vision. Delivery approach. Business architecture creates a planning framework that provides clarity and insight to the organization and assists decision-making in identifying required changes. Architectural blueprints provide the business architecture, business remodeling, creation of vehicle and businesses to communicate and deploy their business vision, formalization of institutional knowledge, cost reduction. Business architecture creates a planning framework that provides clarity and insight into the organization and assists decision-making in identifying required changes. Yes, because you're looking at the architecture of something, how it was built, the design of it, and then architectural blueprint provided by business architecture provide an insight and understanding to how well the organization aligns to its strategy. Its insight is the trigger to change or other planning activity. For each blueprint provided, business architecture may define current state, future state, and more transition states that are used to transition in the future state. Interesting. Well, yeah, kind of like we could design what already is here and we can add to it, so current state, future state, and transition states, because like a blueprint is not just a page, it's like 5-6 pages, so maybe it's kind of like everything in between. Business architects require a view of the entire organization. In general, they may report directly to a member or senior leadership. Business architects require a broad understanding on the organization, including its environment and industry trends, structure and reporting relationships, value streams, capabilities, processes, information, and data stores, and how these elements align to support the strategy or the organization. These are what you report on, correct, in order for you to kind of like figure shit out. And business architects require a view of the entire organization. Business architects play an important role in communicating and innovating the strategy of the organization, so it has to be kind of like architected in a way where people can read it. They utilize blueprints, models, insights provided by business architecture and continually advocate the strategy for the organization and address individual stakeholder needs within the scope of the organization's goals. There are several factors central to the successful business architecture. Support of the executive business leadership team, we need that. Integration with clear and effective governance processes, including organizational decision-making authorities, for example, for investments, initiative, and infrastructure decisions. Interaction with ongoing initiatives. This might include participation in steering committees and other similar advisory groups, and access to senior leadership, departmental managers, product owners, solution architects, project businesses analysts, and project managers. These are basically like the major stakeholders, I guess, right? Okay, to make business architecture useful to the organization, business analysts require a view of the entire organization that is under analysis. Again, we mentioned that before. Full support from the senior leadership, we mentioned that before. Participation for business owners and subject matter experts, we mentioned that before. Organizational strategy to be in place and a business imperative to be addressed. I mean, like, yeah, there's a strategy in place for us to kind of like build around it and, or use for the building process, and a business imperative to be addressed, as in like, you know, what's an imperative? One second, because my view as an imperative is like, you know, this needs to be done, right? I don't know, there always has to be a goal, necessary or urgent. Imperative means necessary or urgent. 11.4.2, business analysis scope. Now, what about the scope? Well, who's the change sponsor? Ideally, the sponsor of the business architecture initiative is a senior executive or business owner with the organization. However, the sponsor may also be a line of business owner. I don't fucking know what that means. Here, let's Google it. A line of business owner is responsible for managing a specific segment of the company's operations. Can you see it? Sorry, man, I can't, I'm... So a line of business owner is just a guy who kind of like owns a line. Maybe if it's a company that has multiple products, he owns a line of product, as in like he's the one responsible for that line of product. Who are the targets, the change targets? Following list identifies the possible primary change targets resulting from a business architecture analysis: business capabilities, business value streams, initiative plans, investment decisions, and portfolio decisions. Following groups of people use business architecture to guide change within the organization: management at all levels of the organization, product or service owners, operational units, solution architects, project managers, and business analysts working under contexts. Was the business analyst position, as always, is in between these fuckers, and he's the one designing this time around, and he's the one talking to people, making sure that the functions are right. He's the one talking to people to make sure like they're still able to read the architecture he's growing. I haven't started reading yet. The goal of a business analyst is to be working within the discipline of the business architecture is to understand the entire enterprise context and provide balanced insight into the elements and the relationship across the enterprise. Again, like, you know, the idea behind it is like, you know, what are you designing? Provide a holistic, understandable view of all the specialties within the organization. Business architecture provides a variety of models on the organization. These models or blueprints provide holistic insight into the organization that becomes the basis of strategic decisions by the leaders of the organization. To develop a business architecture, the business analyst must understand, assimilate, and align a wide variety of specialties that are of the strategic concerns to the organization. To do this, they require insight, skills, and knowledge from business strategy and goals, conceptual business information, enterprise IT architecture, process architecture, and business performance and intelligence architecture. You need insight and skill from these. Okay. Business architecture supports the strategic advisory of planning and groups that guide ensures the alignment through the various transition states as the change moves towards its future states. Right, the strategic advisory and planning groups that guide and make decisions regarding change within the organization. It provides guidance and insights to how decisions align to strategic goals of the organization and ensures this alignment through the various transition states as the change moves towards its future states. Business architecture provides a broad scope and a holistic view for business analysis. The general outcomes of business architecture include the alignment of the organization to its strategy and the planning of change and the execution of strategy, and ensuring that as change is implemented, it continues to align to the strategy. These business architecture outcomes provide context for requirement analysis, planning and prioritization, estimation, and high-level system design. I'm just reading everything. What was I thinking about? I was thinking about my daily routine and what would it look like. All right, let's calm the fuck down and return. Business architecture provides a broad scope and a holistic view of business analysis. The general outcome of business architecture include the alignment of the organization to its strategy, the planning of change and the execution of strategy, ensuring that change is implemented, it continues to align with the strategy. So like, when we're building the architecture, we have to make sure everything is still aligned, everything is actually executed properly, and the change that is implemented still is aligning. All right, I don't get it. So alignment and ensuring the alignment. These business architecture outcomes provide context for requirement analysis. Oh, look at that. For requirements analysis, planning and prioritization, estimation and high-level system design. This provides insight and alignment with strategy, stakeholder needs, and business capabilities, or else why the fuck are we doing this, right? Architectural views and blueprints provide information that may have otherwise been based on assumptions. That makes sense, because once you draw something, you kind of clearly see how it goes or how it's connected. And I feel that is kind of like something, that's one of the highlighted important things that actually like start existing or start happening. Beautiful. Based on assumptions, minimize the risk of duplication or efforts in creating capabilities, system or information that already exist elsewhere in the enterprise, because you're mapping everything, right? So everything is clear now. And if something's being done more than once, Various models and blueprints provided by business architecture are its key to deliverables. These include, but are not limited to, business capability maps, business value stream maps, organizational maps, information concepts, high process level architecture, and business motivation models. All of these. There are reference models and techniques. Huh. Yeah, normally we look at methodologies, but here we're looking at reference models and techniques. Interesting. I think that will be part 2. This is part 1. Love you guys.